Hey guys! So I'm going to walk you through my take on the visual pathway and how you can figure out all the lesions that are associated with it. I'm doing this on a phone that's taped to a puzzle, so I'm sorry if the quality is low or if something happens in the middle of it. Hopefully nothing will. So to orient you to this drawing, these are the eyeballs. Here's your optic nerve, optic chiasm, optic tracts, and then these bulges are your lateral geniculate nucleus, which is in the thalamus, as you know. And then these are the optic radiations that are leading from the lateral geniculate nucleus back to the primary visual cortex right here. So you can see this line going through the primary visual cortex. That's representing the calcarine sulcus, which is separating the primary visual cortex into a superior and an inferior portion. So when I'm drawing the fibers for this pathway, I like to use two colors to represent one for each eye. You don't have to, I just think it makes it cleaner. So we know that each eye has two different visual fields, right? We have information coming in from the lateral visual field, which we call temporal, and information coming in from the medial visual field, which we call nasal because it's close to the nose. So I'm going to draw those in for both eyes. So again, information coming from the lateral visual world is going to be called temporal. Sorry if you can't read my handwriting. And then the same for the other eye, coming in from the lateral world. We have the temporal visual field versus information coming from the medial world we call nasal because it's close to the nose. Okay, and then, oops, that's a little bit high. So you can see that these are both on the left side of the visual world, right? So this is going to be left nasal and left temporal, and then right nasal and right temporal. And that's going to be important when we get into the lesions later. So another thing is that we also have a temporal and a nasal retina, right, for each eye. So you can see the information from the left nasal visual field is traveling to the right temporal retina. Okay, so just bear that in mind. Usually when we use these terms, we're going to be talking about the visual fields, not the retina. Okay, so now to draw in the actual fibers, I like to remember that information coming from the temporal retina is going to stay ipsilateral. So we're going to come down through our optic nerve. And when we get to the chiasm, we're not going to decussate. We're going to stay ipsilateral to get into the lateral geniculate nucleus. Okay, so same for the other side. Down through the nerve, through the chiasm, and then into the nucleus. Versus information coming from that nasal retina is going to decussate. So we're going to cut down through the nerve, and once we get to the chiasm, we're going to cross to get to the contralateral lateral geniculate nucleus. So same thing for this side. Okay, so now you can see that there is information from both eyes in each geniculate nucleus. So I hope that makes sense. So from there, we are going to send information through two different pathways in the optic radiations to get to the primary visual cortex. So we're going to send fibers superiorly, and the superior fibers are going to end up at the inferior part of the primary visual cortex. So same on this side. We're going to go superiorly and then end up inferiorly. And then we're also going to go inferiorly from that same nucleus. And the inferior fibers are going to end up in the superior part. Okay, so on this side, we're going to go inferiorly here to end in the superior part of the primary visual cortex. And then the same thing with this other one from the contralateral eye. Okay, so we're going to have fibers that go superiorly and end inferiorly, and fibers that go inferiorly and end superiorly. So same thing on this side, we're going superior to end inferior, and then we're going inferior to end superior. So now you can see we have two different bundles of fibers in each set of optic radiations. So the superior one we call the Myers loop. And this inferior one we call Baum's loop. Okay? So the important thing about this is that the Myers loop is carrying information from the superior part of the visual field versus Baum's is carrying information from the inferior part of the visual field. Again, that's going to be important when we get into lesions, which we can do now. So let me grab another piece of paper. I'm going to have to slide them back and forth. So we saw a bunch of lesions where we had two circles that are each divided into 4 parts, right? So when you're looking at these circles, it's important to note that these are representing the visual fields, not the retina. So this is your left eye, and this is your right eye, okay? And this is your temporal field, and this is your nasal field, okay? But this is the left portion of the left eye, and this is the right portion of the right eye. So I'm going to label this at this side as the left temporal versus this side is going to be the right nasal. And then over here we have, since it's on the left side and the nasal side, the left nasal, and then the right side and the temporal side, the right temporal. Okay? And so that's going to correlate to our visual fields that we drew up here. So then, if we choose a random spot to do a lesion, so let's start by doing a lesion here. Okay, so we're knocking out these 2 fibers. All you have to do to figure this out is trace the fibers back that you're knocking out. So we're knocking out this red one. So if we trace that back, we see that we're knocking out our left nasal field. Okay, so I'm going to go back of our right eye. So I'm going to go back here, and on the right eye, I'm going to knock out the left nasal field. Okay? And then the other fiber that we're knocking out is this purple one here. So we trace that back, and we see that we're losing the left temporal visual field of our left eye. So if we go here onto the left eye, I'm going to knock out the left temporal field. Okay? And that's how you figure out these lesion questions. So, and I asked him, and he said that you're not going to be responsible for knowing the exact names of these lesions, so like hemianopsia, non-homonymous, or quadrantenopia. You can learn them if you want, but I would just be comfortable being able to draw these diagrams or recognize where a lesion might be based on these diagrams. So if we do another one, I'll use orange. You might not be able to see orange. Oh well. So let's take a lesion here. So you might notice that this lesion is going straight through the optic chiasm. And that's actually a pretty common spot for lesions because your pituitary gland is sitting right there, right? So if you have a pituitary tumor, a lot of times it can compress this this part of the optic chiasm. So notice that I'm not knocking out these lateral fibers, but just the medial ones that are decussating. So if we're knocking out these, again, we'll draw our circles. Okay, so trace this purple one back, and we see we're knocking out the left temporal field of the left eye. Okay, so we're going to come back here on our left eye and knock out that left temporal field. And then the other fiber we're losing is this red one, so follow that back, and we're losing the right temporal field of the right eye. Okay, so come back to our right eye and knock out that right temporal field. Okay, so that is the lesion that you would get with an optic chiasm compression. And so because these are both the temporal fields that are getting knocked out, we call that bitemporal, and because it's affecting the entire half of the eye, we call it a hemianopia or hemianopsia. So this is a bitemporal hemianopsia that we've heard so much about. And the last example that I want to give you is taking the Myers or Baum's loop into play. So if I use blue here, so let's say we knock out our Myers loop. So we have to remember that the importance of the Myers loop was that it's carrying information from the superior visual field only. One second, I have to take care of my cat. Okay, sorry. So the Myers loop is carrying information from the superior temporal field only. So that's going to change our lesion a little bit. So again, drawing the circles. So again, you just follow the fibers back. So the purple one you see goes to here. We follow that back, and we see that we're losing our left temporal field of our left eye. But remember, we're only losing the superior part of that visual field. So I'm going to go to the left eye and the left temporal field, but I'm only going to knock out the superior part of it. Okay? Versus if I had done the same thing and knocked out Baum's loop instead, it would be the exact same lesion. I'm just going to knock out the inferior quadrant instead. Okay, so then if we continue and we follow the red fiber, we see that we're knocking out our left nasal visual field of our right eye. So again, and it's the superior, I don't know if I've been saying superficial or superior, but I meant superior part of that visual field. So I'm going to go to my diagram, to my right eye, and the left nasal field, and only the superior part. So when it's only knocking out a quarter of the circle, we call it a quadrantanopia rather than a hemianopia. Okay? So I hope that helped. Let me know if you have any questions, and I will post a blank template version of this that you can practice on.